Hi.
Hello, how are you this morning?
Eh, we're in David's car.
Ooh. It must be ride day.
It is ride day.
It's like Rosh. One quarter, we celebrate 2 days sometimes.
Yeah.
This is only one day.
Oops. Um, so Dara was in and gone or what?
Yeah, she was it. She got here yesterday about 4 o'clock. She came in, said hello, gave me a hug, went downstairs, changed her clothes, left for the board meeting dinner. I got home at 8:20 last night from class. She got home
Right.
at about 8:50. We both got ready for bed. Went into bed and I watched the show I had recorded and she was reading. Got up this morning, she left at 7:30 and that's it.
That's it. Okay.
She'll be back next Tuesday.
All right. Okay, I'm going on mute. See you.
Okay, me too.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
And good
Good morning.
morning.
Good morning.
We are taking David's car out for its monthly ride, so that's where we are. So we're on mute. Okay.
Okay. Right. All right. So yesterday we began talking about the prohibited witchcraft. Um, but it again, this mitzvah is not, as the Rambam points out, it's not unique to dealing with witches, but rather it is part of a broader notion that if somebody, according to halacha, is supposed to be put to death, then you are meant to carry it out. You're not allowed to, as it says here, pardon. You're not supposed to pardon somebody if they've already been proven to be deserving of the death penalty. This is a theme that we see throughout the Torah, where the Torah, even early on, even with the story of Cain, but certainly when Hashem talks to Noah after the flood, he makes it clear that tolerating, especially things like murder, um, in other words, not prosecuting somebody who's guilty of murder will be dealt with in the harshest way by Hashem. there has to be a robust response to murder, and then that gets extended to other prohibitions, especially the most serious prohibitions. As we see here, the Rambam is saying that part of that is that you're not supposed to pardon somebody who is supposed to get the death penalty. In the Torah, it sounds like this is not simply something that is about controlling the behavior of a larger population. In other words, it's not simply a deterrence for crime. From the Torah, it sounds like it's bigger than that. Like when Hashem is talking to Cain, he makes it sound like the very earth itself cries out for a response to the spilling of the blood of somebody else, of murder. And also even the notion of the blood avenger. When we saw the language about the blood of avenger, and when you see it in the Torah, but especially like when you see it in halacha, it's not simply that somebody who's filled with rage has the permission to kill somebody who killed their family, a member of their family, but that they're encouraged to do it, that this is something that the Torah wants them to do, which is there's something in the background of this that I always found a bit fuzzy, a little bit cloudy. Because it's not simply, it's not treated like other legal matters. There's something that's so important, and it seems to be important even as a spiritual response to what's happened. Yeah. It doesn't even say who would be the person who pardons the person. The person is liable for the death penalty, but who is it that pardons him? Who is being warned here? Is it the court that's being warned? Is it a king that's being warned? Who do you think is being warned here that against pardoning somebody like that? So it's also interesting about whoever it is, and we assume it's somebody in leadership representing the people. You're not allowed to, and this goes for any other of the death penalties. All righty. There was something else yesterday, wasn't there? There was something else we got onto. Maybe I don't know if this was it, but one of the issues that appears, the reason why witchcraft would have such a severe penalty seems to be that it is a kind of alternative to God. In other words, these people seem to be providing protection, fulfillment of dreams, and via some kind of formula that doesn't require a relationship with God. So in some ways, when the person sets them up as themselves up as a sorcerer, they are setting themselves up as competition to God. And like you can go the religious way or you can go the way of sorcery. This is not exactly this, but it's very similar to this. And I'm sure this happened many times in history, but in the early 60s, when there was experimentation with LSD and other hallucinogens like psilocybin. So there was a feeling at the time that this could that this experience, that this medicine could be the secret to a transformed society. This was if you read about or listen to Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, when he was talking about working with Timothy Leary and others on the East Coast, as they were experimenting with LSD, they felt like there was, not only did you have a glimpse into a world beyond, but also that the effect of having that glimpse, the effect of the experience, was one that led to only positive things, in a sense of interconnectedness, a sense of peace and love, etc. And all it takes is ingesting something, and suddenly you're transformed. But so they were tinkering with it because they really did think that this could be a solution to the world's worst problems. But it was just one of the real problems was you couldn't maintain this enlightenment. In other words, you'd have the experience and you'd see the world through these different eyes and so the glory kind of what is beyond with these eyes. But then you couldn't stay there. You end up coming back to where you were. And they experimented in all manner of ways to try to keep maintain that perspective so that you could stay there, and not just keep on coming back to where you were. But they could not. They were not successful at doing that. Now, while they were doing that over there on the West Coast, there were all sorts of people that were experimenting with it. And there's that famous book by, I think, Thomas Wolfe about Ken Kesey and his merry pranksters, which he called them. They also were doing a similar kind of thing. They felt like you could live on another plane. And again, this plane is a plane where you're really seeing the world from a perspective that is goodness and interconnectedness and similar to what the people on the East Coast were hoping for. They instead of the ones on the East Coast were more like they were all PhDs. They're looking at it more like scientists who are experimenting on themselves. The Ken Kesey ones were just living it. They felt like, if they could live it and then share it with people. So the Tom Wolfe's book was, I think, called Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. And what they would do is they'd travel to places and there'd be music and sound and light shows and things like that. And the people that were there are all ingesting LSD. And then the hope was that this would sort of light a kind of fire and that this would spread. And as it spread, enlightenment would spread, because this, they thought, was the key to enlightenment. Just taking this substance would solve our thorniest interpersonal issues. But again, even it sort of began to implode on itself. It could not be maintained, this thing, and that they end up sort of back where they were never really getting to the place that they could see but could not grasp. So Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, decides that he's going to see if there's some other way to get to what it is that that he saw, that place that he saw. And so he went to India. He got the sense that it would, if he's going to explore somewhere, he should explore in India. And right about the time when he was going to give up because he really hadn't found anything there, he ends up getting introduced to this person who becomes his guru, who the way he describes it, this man was living in that place that he had gone to, and he was living there and he was staying there. And so he felt like he found it. He felt like he found this, and that path was through the particular kind of Hinduism that was practiced by his teacher, his master. As he evolved, this is how he describes it. As he evolves, he comes to decide that this path is not only available in Hinduism, this path is available in many different ways. The Muslims have this path, the Christians have this path, and eventually he mentioned that Judaism has this path. He gave a lecture which is available on YouTube to the University of Judaism, and it was packed with Jews, including even like some rabbis and stuff, people knowledgeable that wanted to hear him talk about his experience with Judaism and some of his observations. And he says in that speech that he grew up Jewish. If he had realized that that what he was looking for was in Judaism, he would have never looked anywhere else. But he had no clue that it was available in Judaism because it wasn't at all to be found in the Jewish places he was spending time in. He didn't see it in the temple he belonged to. He didn't see it in the rabbis that he met or in any Jewish text that he had been introduced to. He just didn't see it there. And therefore he assumed that it isn't in Judaism. It could be found in other places. But, he was telling them that he does, at the point when he's talking to them, he knows that you can get to this place with Judaism as well. But that it was the notion that I sort of see this here in this this kind of conflict between witchcraft and what we'll call Derech Hashem, the way of God. That witchcraft is like the LSD. Witchcraft is the pill, as it were, and it competes with Torah because as long as all it takes is a pill, and you don't have to work on your character, and you don't have to live with challenges of discomfort and pain and other kinds of things on your path towards your own personal enlightenment and the fulfillment of your potential. You don't have to spend your time working on all that. You could just take a pill. And so I see that also here to some degree. Aryeh Kaplan mentions that at one point, this is based on some statements, rabbinic statements, but he adds a little bit of his own understanding into it. And he suggested that there's this first epoch of Jewish peoplehood. During that epoch, prophecy was the great goal. the great achievement, spiritual achievement. It is a connection to God on the highest level available to human beings. And it is enlightenment, as it were. But the path to being a prophet, as is outlined to some degree in the Gemara, but more thoroughly in the Rambam and in other works, and then clarified a bit in the Ramchal and then Aryeh Kaplan, where that the school of prophecy was a school. In other words, you were being mentored and trained in what are the arts of prophecy, and that the goal is that you achieve that enlightenment, but there's no guarantee. But what you can do is do all the legwork, all the available growth, and then it's up to God to decide if he's going to make that last bit, that last connection. But that path takes a long time, and it's hard work. You're being challenged about your character. The Gemara talks about this, and the Rambam, again, sort of fleshes it out. A Navi is expected to have fine character, which means if there are elements of their character that are, that need work, then they have to do that work on that character work. They have to be somebody who follows the Torah entirely. They have to be somebody who has scholarship. They have to, so these are, and when we talk about your human characteristics, a big part of that is sorry, trying to turn this off. A big part of that is also interpersonal relationships. So you're working on all this kind of stuff, and that's besides learning the specific art of prophecy, of that is going to eventually enable this connection between you and the other person. So this is really the deepest kind of work. And it took a long time for this to happen, and a lot of mentoring. And so, if you had bright, motivated, inspired people who wanted to further their avodas Hashem, they would go into prophecy school, or they would become apprentices to a prophet. And this is what's called B'nai Hanavim, the sons of the prophets, that are mentioned at various places in the works of the prophets. So this is what Aryeh Kaplan suggests, that idolatry offered some of the same benefits, sort of like witchcraft. In other words, it offered some of the same kind of stuff, but without having to do the work on yourself. You didn't have to do the character work. You didn't have to study. You didn't have to develop in your ability to have relationships. You just would follow some ritual or ingest some kind of plants or something, and then you would achieve this. So there was like a shortcut to enlightenment. That's what idolatry was offering. And so at one point, the sages of the men of the Great Assembly decided that they need to get rid of idolatry amongst the people, and that the best way for them to achieve that is to forbid people to study to become prophets. In other words, the teaching of prophecy is now going to be forbidden, because while people genuinely aspire for the goals that prophecy can achieve, it makes them susceptible to quick fixes that are offered in the spheres of idolatry. So they felt like they could once and for all get rid of idolatry, but in order to do it, they would need to forbid the teaching of prophecy. And the language that's used by the rabbis is they traded the Yetzer Hara of idolatry, they traded it for prophecy. In other words, they got rid of the Yetzer Hara for idolatry, but at the cost of prophecy, that there would not be prophecy anymore. And the tradition became there are no more prophets from that time on. Now, according to Aryeh Kaplan, what happened was the prophecy school went underground. And this could have been even with a wink from the people who were forbidding it. That, in other words, if somebody who would go to would keep the kind of prophecy school in secret, right? They're not as the kind of people that they're concerned about going off into idolatry, I guess. So this school of underground teachings of prophecy becomes what we call the school of Kabbalah. And that initially these teachings of Kabbalah were the kind of teachings that somebody who was mentoring to become a prophet would have studied or would have learned. Then apparently, and this he gets from documents written by these people that were doing it. Again, this is happening during the time of the Men of the Great Assembly are like 350 before the Common Era. So this would have been going on for several hundred years, and but we have no documentary evidence of it in the beginning. We do start to have documentary evidence for it around the first century of the Common Era and then second century of the Common Era. I mean, we have works that portend, they claim to be teachings from that era. And they describe the teachings and they describe the goals of those teachings. By that time, it's already clear, like let's say, especially in the first century, and then in the beginning of the second century of the Common Era, it was already being said that it's too dangerous to try to go for prophecy. We're not pure enough anymore. We don't have the ashes of the red heifer. So it's trying to go for prophecy is very dangerous. It's possible that this story of the four who enter the Pardes are trying for something like that. And so that's happening at the very beginning of the second century of the Common Era. But that also represents this kind of dichotomy, that you have the easy path and you have the difficult path, but ultimately the easy path is no path. But it sure looks like a path, and it sure feels like a path in the beginning. But in the end, it is no path. And I guess for us, that book, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe, I mean, it's written in a sort of crazy kind of way but which somehow does capture some of or it helps you get a window into the experience of these people. But if you're looking at them the way they saw it at some point, that they were like explorers on the edge of a tremendous breakthrough for mankind. And you see them out there and out there and out there, and then it just collapses because it doesn't have that path. That would, again, that there are those who would suggest that this is the continuous message of the Torah, that there isn't a shortcut when it comes to spirituality. And Rabbi Twersky, Rabbi Michal Twersky, he should live long and in good health. So this was his explanation for the mitzvah or the negative commandment to, when you're fashioning the altar, to not fashion it with stones that have been cut by metal. So the Chazal, the Midrash says that it's not appropriate that which shortens man's life should be associated with that which lengthens man's life. So the way that's typically understood is that from metal you make weapons, and weapons are made to shorten people's lives. They're made to defeat an enemy, to kill another person, to shorten somebody's life. Whereas the Mizbeach, the purpose of sacrifice, is an enlivened and renewed connection to God, and a connection to God is like everlasting life. So the Mizbeach represents long life or everlasting life, and the metal and the sword represents the shortened life, the thing that shortens life. That's typically how it's understood. But Rabbi Twersky suggested that from metal you also have technology, like the plow. The plow was a dramatic transformation. Suddenly, there was a kind of farming and a degree of, suddenly you could farm much larger tracts of land. You could plant better crops because you were able to dig deeper into these furrows, but also just that fact of having a plow allowed you to have these expanded, extensive kind of farms, which would never have been possible before without it. And it becomes like a symbol for technology. And for a long time, that's how technology was expressed. You had wagons, chariots, or and other kinds of tools, hammers and screwdrivers, and with the stuff of metals, you were able to transform not just what work was, but also man's ability to conquer nature. And so metal, in a way, becomes the symbol of technology. One of the great benefits of technology for the average person is that it makes your life easier. It means that what used to take a long time is much shorter. So what used to take, let's say, hours to do, let's say you had something like a washing machine. So cleaning clothes for a woman of a household, cleaning the clothes is hours of work, right? And suddenly there's a washing machine which renders it to almost no work. And so with so many other aspects of technology. So one of the byproducts of technology is that it's a kind of shortcut to an end product. It used to be a long path to get to this end product, but now it's that is shortened and it's made easier. So it used to be that I had to, if I wanted to make clothing, I would have to shear a sheep and then clean the wool and then spin the wool into threads and then or maybe to dye it before I did it, to dye it and then spin it into threads, and then I would have to have by hand I would have to like knit or crochet or something in order to get it, and then suddenly there's a loom, and the loom allows for again making things quicker, making things bigger, making things better. And eventually you get to the kind of things we have where it's totally automated and you can get a sweater or you can get any of your clothing. It's all automated. Some guy had to build it, but once somebody built it, then another person just needs to push a button. And for everybody else, just pushing the button is going to get you to the place where you end up having this particular thing. So that notion of a kind of shortcut, the kind of thing that technology affords, a kind of shortcut to an end result, Rabbi Tversky was saying, is what is objectionable about using metal on the altar. That there is no shortcut when it comes to a connection to the divine. There is no button that you push, no technology of the spirit that somebody is going to come up with that is going to bypass the otherwise work that is required in order to get to this connection with God. So again, all of those coming around that same notion that it looks at first like competition with God, but it ends up being empty. It itself, of course, you can't have competition to God, but even somebody who thinks they found it, for a moment, they go out and they try it, and then it just doesn't end up doing it. So there we have it. Okay.
Rabbi, just
Yeah.
one thing I thought of when we talked about it last time too.
Yeah.
We read these stories, these Hasidic stories, in Zevin's book of Hasidic, for the Parsha, actually.
Yeah.
And there's always some tzaddik who's making something that seems like a prophet. They know something they shouldn't have known before.
Right.
I was thinking that that's kind of like, it's not witchcraft, but it's, I don't know.
I mean, the Rambam lists like a bunch of different, what he calls levels of prophecy. At the lower levels, he identifies something called Ruach HaKodesh.
Right.
Ruach HaKodesh seems to mean divine inspiration, which is not prophecy entirely, but it is something akin to prophecy. In other words, so he'll say something like the book of Tehillim was written with Ruach HaKodesh. What does that mean? It's written with Ruach HaKodesh. It doesn't mean that King David is in a prophetic state and he sees these words and then he writes them down. That's not what it means. It means he was inspired when he wrote it. He wrote it with inspiration. And the end product reflects that. It reflects that it was written with that. There still is a notion that is not just passed down amongst Kabbalists, but it's passed down even in the schools of higher learning, that somebody could purify themselves to some degree, to a certain degree, and then have a heightened sense of the world and be able to do these things. And it's not even necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to do with Torah. I mean, it could be that there are people that are living what you call a righteous life, even righteous Gentiles, who might be able to access things like that. That as you work on yourself and what's called kind of purify yourself by, making your character better and learning more and doing those kind of things, that you actually can achieve a state where you're more sensitive to this kind of divine wavelength. So there might be because of that, you might have access to certain kinds of information that the average person doesn't have access to. But it's not prophecy.
Right.
That's not prophecy. But so we assume that even practically there I I during much of my life went to people who I felt had that kind of vision, to ask them questions and advice. And I would continue to do that if I'm around somebody like that. Um, and so and I feel like I've seen something of that in other people. Um, not the way not like the Baal Shem Tov stories, where they
Right.
know to that degree. But like when you'd go to the Stipler, I mean, it was taken for granted by the people that visited the Stipler that he had some kind of vision that he could see through you to some degree
Right.
and stuff. So yeah, but that's what I understand is sort of in that category that the Rambam calls Ruach HaKodesh.
Thank
And
you.
yeah. Okay. All right. I look forward to learning some more, but just to frustrate you, because for some reason I feel like frustrating you, I'm not going to be here Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to a wedding in Los Angeles, and therefore I'm not going to be around Monday and Tuesday. So the next time for
But
our
you are going
Rambam
to be
class,
here Tuesday night,
I will be here Tuesday night.
you
I'll be
think?
here. I mean, yeah, unless I'm scheduled to be here with several hours to spare. And so
Okay,
I hope to be there. And then so Tuesday night, we'd have the Tuesday night class. Then Wednesday we would meet, and Thursday, of course. So we're going to meet tomorrow, and then our next meetings would be Tuesday night.
got it.
Okay.
I won't forget again.
Okay. All right. Be well,
See you
guys.
tomorrow.
Okay.